The total lunar eclipse happening on September 7th in the sign of Pisces is honestly a really powerful moment in the sky, and it's a really powerful moment in the astrology of September, and it kind of represents like a culmination moment, and it's going to be one that is deeply emotional but also deeply spiritual and deeply healing. Eclipses are associated with changes and they tend to bring endings, but with every ending is a new beginning, and so they tend to bring like shifts in direction. But with this one, it has to do with all things Pisces. So that could be like our dreams, or it could be around boundaries or compassion and things like surrender, and also, things coming to an end because Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. So it represents like things coming to an end before we enter into a new chapter. And it could have to do with those deeply spiritual mysteries that like don't make logical sense. So if you're curious about what to expect for this upcoming eclipse season, then be sure to like and subscribe down below so that you can stay updated on what's going on in the sky. And also, if you're new here, hi, I'm Mackenzie, aka Astromac. I'm a professional astrologer and I talk all things astrology on this channel. And I also have a Patreon where I give weekly astrology forecasts for the astrology of the upcoming week. And also, I offer a bunch of different astrology readings. So if you're interested in that, then be sure to check the link out down below. So now, before we get any further, let's pull up the chart and dive right into what we can expect for this total lunar eclipse in Pisces. So let's start with what even is eclipse season? Eclipse season is that time of year where we happen to have eclipses. It's simple as that. And eclipses are not some like rare phenomenon. We have eclipse season twice a year. And during eclipse season, we get a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse. And depending on how close those lunations are to the lunar nodes really depends on if it's going to be a total eclipse or a partial eclipse. So this eclipse that we have on September 7th is a total lunar eclipse. So let's talk about what a lunar eclipse is. So basically a lunar eclipse is a full moon. So it's when the sun and the moon are sitting directly opposite each other in the sky. But during a lunar eclipse, it's when Earth kind of passes between the sun and the moon. And so the Earth kind of casts a shadow onto the moon. And so the moon might appear to be red during a lunar eclipse. And so the moon's orbit around Earth is tilted, and so that's why we don't get like lunar eclipses during every full moon. It's kind of like the sun, Earth, and the moon all have to align just right, and that's indicated by the lunar nodes. And so right now we've got the North Node in Pisces and the South Node in Virgo, and so that's why the eclipses this year are happening on this Virgo-Pisces axis. So this particular total lunar eclipse will only be visible in Antarctica, Australia, Asia, Eastern Europe, and Africa, as well as parts of the Eastern Atlantic and Western Pacific Ocean, so it will not be visible in North or South America, so sorry guys. But if you've ever seen a total lunar eclipse before, it is pretty cool. It's like the whole moon just slowly starts to turn like this orangey red color. So I do understand why it has like that association with being eerie. I always think about like what our ancestors thought, not so long ago before they understood what eclipses were. Like, what were they thinking when they saw the moon suddenly turn red? I can imagine it probably felt a bit like an eerie omen. And so that's probably why eclipses have so many like superstitions around them. But now that we know like what eclipses are and what causes eclipses to happen, basically a total lunar eclipse is just like a really powerful, super potent full moon. And full moons are just times where it's like, things are illuminated and things get revealed, and it's a time of past manifestations coming to fruition, and it's also a really powerful time of release and letting go of those things that no longer serve us. And so during full moons, they can be times of closure, and with an eclipse, it just kind of brings it with a little bit more oomph, a little bit more intensity. So because of the involvement of like the North and South Node during eclipses, it's kind of like eclipse season tends to be those times that just feel more fated, where it's like, doors are closing and other doors are opening, chapters are ending and new chapters are beginning, or it might be like a book is ending and a new book is beginning in your life, and truths might be surfacing that it's like you couldn't ignore them even if you tried, and it just brings these changes. And so changes are happening and things are being illuminated and revealed in a bigger way. So I tend to always associate eclipse season with like these cosmic plot twists where it's like, a lot is happening, and so it's like we're in the juicy part of the story, and it's like things are building and things just feel like there's just like a lot going on all at the same time. And so these changes and these plot twists that are happening, it could be happening externally for you, or it might be more of like a internal thing. You know, it just depends on where this eclipse is happening for you and if it's making aspects to any of your personal planets. But these things that are happening and like these changes that are happening and the things that are being illuminated, I tend to view them as these times where it's like we're being guided back onto our intended pathway for this lifetime. And so that's why eclipse season just tends to feel a little bit more faded than usual. Now, that doesn't rule out our free will, though, because keep in mind that we are always in control of how we respond to these changes and these plot twists that are happening in our lives. And we're in control of our thoughts and our words and our actions and our attitudes and our beliefs. So just keep that in mind, because sometimes during eclipse season, it can feel like a little bit of like a wild card energy where it's like, feels like a lot is out of our control, but always keep in mind that we always have our free will. And that really puts the power back in our own hands when we can utilize, our free will. So just remember that, like, when things feel really like chaotic or out of control, just bring your attention and your awareness back to what you are in control of. And you're in control of how you respond to these changes, and you're in control of how you react, even though sometimes it may not feel like that. But you're also in control of how you think and how you feel about these changes and these things that are happening during eclipse season. And you're in control of the information that you're taking in as well. And you're in control of your actions. And if I could just keep going on and on, but anyway, you get it. Also, try to keep in mind that these things that are happening during eclipse season, they're not happening to you, but they're always happening for you. And so as we can see here, this full moon is happening at 15 degrees of Pisces. So if you have any planets or angles around that same degree, then you'll probably be feeling this eclipse a little bit stronger than others. Or if you have any planets or points around that 15 degrees of any of the mutable signs, really. If you don't have any planets or points around that degree, then just think of this as like a really strong full moon, and it's kind of energizing the house that it's happening in. So that 15 degrees of Pisces. So with this total lunar eclipse happening in the sign of Pisces, I really see it as being a time where it's like something is coming to an end that is necessary in our lives. And it could be like a really big and obvious ending in our life, or it could be more of like a subtle ending. And it just really depends on where this full moon is happening in your chart, because it's not like it's going to express the exact same way for every single person in the world. So this might be an ending that you've like felt coming for a while, or it might be something that you've kind of struggled to end on your own. And so it's like this eclipse is coming in saying like, I'll take care of it for you. Because eclipses tend to act as like these catalyst moments where it's like it speeds things up for us. And so with this catalyst energy, it's kind of like nudging us in a particular direction, and it might be a direction that we've already been leaning in on our own. And so this eclipse comes in and like nudges us even further and like pushes us further along. So as things are coming to a close in this Pisces area of your life, especially if you have planets or points around that 15 degrees of Pisces, then over the course of like the next 6 months, then you might find yourself going through this process of like a letting go process and a releasing process. And you're being asked to kind of like go with the flow a little bit, because Pisces is that mutable water sign, and it's all about dissolving boundaries and softening, and it's all about compassion and connecting to the collective and wanting to like merge and feel all the things. So being mutable water, this is all about surrender and letting go and moving with the flow. So this eclipse is our invitation to let go of something that we've been like gripping to and clinging to really hard. Like imagine you're holding onto something really tightly, and so under this eclipse we're being asked to kind of like loosen our grip a little and release something that really no longer serves our new level of spiritual awareness and those things that no longer serve our spirit, really. So I really feel like those Pisces themes of surrender and compassion and healing, like spiritual healing and endings, and also forgiveness and the release of illusions is going to be like, those are going to be big themes during this full moon eclipse. And so I really see this as being a time to lean into that energy of trust, trusting that what is being illuminated and what's being revealed, and trusting that what's falling away and what's being released and what's being let go of and left in the past, it's happening for you. And really trust in that divine timing, or whatever it is that you want to believe in. Because this isn't really a time where you want to be listening to those anxieties or those fears, but you want to lean into that energy of trust and having faith in something. Like, for example, one of my beliefs is that no matter what's going on, it's that everything is always happening exactly as it's supposed to. Even if things feel like super shitty and I feel like I'm going through like the worst time of my life and it's like I feel like I want to give up, or I'm like, it's just like no matter what's going on, I have this belief deep down. And I might be like kicking and screaming and yelling and cursing my way through it, but deep down I do believe and I trust that in the grand scheme of things that everything is working out exactly as it's supposed to, because it just simply can't be any other way. And I'm not saying that makes it like easier to get through those difficult times, although it does in some sense make it a little bit easier when I have that belief deep down. But it's like, for the sake of my sanity, it's like I just have to believe that no matter what I'm going through and no matter what's going on around me and what's going on within me, that everything is always working out exactly as it's supposed to. And so for you, it's like when you can find that feeling of trust and that feeling of like having faith in something or believing in something, whether it's like you believe in this power of a magical plant or a magical tree, that like when you touch this tree that everything is going to be okay, or like whatever it is, like just having your own belief system and having something to believe in, and most importantly just believing in yourself and trusting in yourself. I think that's going to be most important under this eclipse. So really lean into that feeling of faith in something under this eclipse, because, when we lean into faith, it leans us away from fear. And so you want to be leaning into faith in something, and that'll make eclipse season a lot easier. Because again, when we don't have faith, that's when like those anxieties and those fears can get really loud. And they can really like creep in and really take hold of our mind. And so you want to be leaning into faith in something. So if you can lean into like trusting and having faith that whatever endings are happening in your life or whatever things are being illuminated, they're happening for you. And it's all a part of your path and guiding you back onto your intended pathway for this lifetime. And so as you're releasing and letting go, just trusting in that, that'll make like releasing and letting go a lot easier when you can trust that it's happening for you. Just approaching things with like this open mindset and this feeling of acceptance and this feeling of like going with that flow and not resisting. That'll make this eclipse a lot easier because Pisces energy is all about that flow and having faith in something that's much bigger than you. And it's also all about that deep spiritual interconnectedness that connects every living being on this earth and beyond this earth. And Pisces is such a deeply sensitive and compassionate and empathetic sign, so I think that we'll probably be feeling all the feels under this eclipse. So we might find ourselves feeling a little bit overwhelmed or like hypersensitive under this eclipse. So my advice is to just like let yourself feel whatever you're feeling. Like this is not the time to shove down your emotions and kind of like stuff those down, but let those be expressed and let those out. And also try connecting with others, because remember, we're all being influenced by this eclipse and we're all feeling this eclipse season energy. Like some maybe more than others, but we're all feeling it. And so connecting with others and sharing how you're feeling, that brings that connection. That's so Piscean. So with that heightened sensitivity and those heightened emotions, sometimes this can bring like sleep disturbances, and it can even bring like overthinking and that comparison where we're like comparing our journey to other people's. And so really try to like put the blinders on a little bit under this eclipse and just kind of like keep your eyes on your own path. It's important to just kind of like ride that wave for like whatever's coming up for you and not resist the energy. Because when you're in this state of resistance, it's almost like you're trying to swim upstream or swim against the tide of a river. And when you're doing that, like you're just going to exhaust yourself and it's going to feel like you're not getting anywhere. So when you can just release and actually go with the flow of that river and just be open to wherever it's taking you, like that's the energy you really want to be leaning into with this eclipse. Now, with this being the first eclipse of this eclipse season and these eclipses happening on the Pisces Virgo axis, I really feel like the theme of this eclipse season is going to be all about the body, mind, spirit connection. And it'll be highlighting those themes of how like our physical health has a way of impacting our emotional or mental or spiritual health, and vice versa, and how all of those have a way of influencing each other. Because all of these things, as we know, are deeply interconnected. And like I said this in my Patreon, but to be spiritual, it's not like we have to sit in meditation for like 6 hours a day and, perform these big, like huge rituals. But it's in those little moments of presence throughout our day, like where we're just so present in our surroundings and in our day and in our life. And it's also in how we care for our physical bodies and how we care for others. Like, that is so spiritual, because even when you think about it, like being alive as a human in our physical bodies is deeply spiritual. And so I think these eclipses might kind of like stir up things pertaining to our health and our well-being and our sense of spirituality, because like I said, this is like the body, mind, spirit axis, the Virgo Pisces axis. And so I really see these eclipses as being a really healing and cleansing time of coming back into like a spiritual alignment. Because, we all get out of alignment sometimes, and, these eclipses have a way of nudging us back into alignment and, again, nudging us back onto our intended pathway. And I always say that with healing, you're going to have to do some feeling, so get ready to feel some feels under this full moon. And I really challenge you to try to be present with what it is that you're feeling, and, don't identify with it and don't try to give it any kind of meaning, but just allow yourself to feel what you're feeling and, express it. Don't stuff it down, but allow it to come up. And as those feelings are coming up, don't latch onto them either. Just allow them to pass through, because our emotions are just visitors passing through. And as those are passing through you, just trust that it is healing something within you. Whether it's healing from past hurts, or it's like it could even be old grief coming up as well. But just trust that, with whatever you're feeling, just trust that it is healing something, whether it's healing your past or healing past hurts or whatever it might be. Another thing that tells me that this will probably be a very emotional full moon eclipse is because it's forming a very actually gorgeous trine to the planet Jupiter in Cancer. And, Jupiter is that planet that expands whatever it touches. So I think that we can expect to feel some big feels under this. But it's kind of like, if Pisces is the mystic, then Jupiter is kind of like this, like wise, protective energy that's like this mothering and nurturing presence during this full moon. So I do kind of feel like Jupiter is providing almost like this like emotional support for us during this eclipse season, reminding us that like even as we're releasing and letting go and loosening our grip on things, it's kind of like there's something or someone that is there to kind of help cushion our fall. It's like Jupiter is telling us that what's being released and let go of is ultimately for our own growth and nourishment and for our own good and for our own healing. To me, it almost feels like Jupiter is saying, like, you're safe to let this go. Like, you're going to be okay. And it's reminding us that, like, whatever is closing or being released or, whatever is coming to an end right now is really clearing up space for more abundance and for more opportunities that are aligned with our intended pathway for this lifetime and more aligned with our new spiritual awareness. Now, some things to look out for and some things to keep in mind during this eclipse, because, just during eclipse season in general, we're just feeling a little more sensitive and we're just feeling like our nervous system is just a little more revved up than usual. So because this is happening in Pisces, be aware of any tendency towards like escapism and wanting to like check out from reality completely. You might find yourself almost wanting to like dissociate or create like this fantasy world that's really not all that helpful to like our actual reality and our actual current situation. And that can lead to things like delusions or illusions. And, when we're leaning into that escapism, it can make it really hard to face those changes that are wanting to happen in our lives during these eclipses. And so under the eclipse, I really challenge you to try and ground yourself firmly in reality and not lean into those escapist tendencies. Like, this is not the energy where you want to be like deluding yourself or lying to yourself or like leaning into these like delusions or these fantasy worlds that we've created. This is a time where you want to ground yourself and be very present in your life, really. because we might find that it is like those delusions, or like, you know, we create these fantasies in our heads, and it might actually be those fantasies or those delusions that could be holding us back. And so we might be releasing those under this eclipse. And so we might be, again, releasing or letting go of those old illusions or those old fantasies or those old dreams that we've had. And you know, maybe if like your pattern or your tendency is to kind of like check out of reality and indulge in those escapist tendencies, then maybe that's what you'll be releasing under this eclipse. Because this is happening in the sign of Pisces, I don't really see this as being like a time where we're going to be feeling like super clear and clear-minded. So it's probably not the best time to make any kind of like definitive or final decisions, but so if you can kind of hold off for a little bit until after eclipse season to make any kind of important decision, then that would probably be best. Because you don't want to be making any kind of decision like in the heat of the moment or in any kind of like emotional state, like heightened emotional state. Like you want to be feeling clear-minded and clear-headed. But definitely like pay attention and observe what's going on in your life, and pay attention to what's being illuminated during this time. And again, just like take note and then act accordingly after eclipse season. Also, this is a time to really pay attention to your intuition and pay attention to like your gut feelings and what your feelings are telling you, because our intuition is going to be way heightened during this time. But just make sure it's actually your intuition, because I think it's hard to sometimes discern between what's intuition and what's our anxieties. And so just always remember that intuition is calm, and it comes from this knowing space. You know, it shows up differently for everybody, but it's not going to be fear-based. That's going to be anxiety always. And so just keep in mind that when these eclipses hit in Pisces, we're being confronted with these themes of like illusions and almost disillusionment. Like, where have we been living in this delusional, made-up fantasy world that is actually not helpful to us, but is hindering us and keeping us back? Or, you know, where have you been numbing out instead of feeling your feelings and really being honest with yourself and not lying to yourself anymore? And then, like, conversely, you know, where have we forgotten that, you know, the invisible world of our dreams and our intuition and the spiritual world is just as real as what we can physically touch? And so finding a way to honor our dreams and honor our intuition, because I do feel like in this world that we live in, like our dreams and our intuition, they get discounted as being like, you know, woo woo or whatever. But anytime that you've acted against your intuition, just think about like the ramifications that happen, but then think of those times that you did listen to your intuition and what came from it. And so I really do feel like under this full moon eclipse, it's going to be a time of honoring our intuition and honoring that spiritual connection. So some advice that I have for this full moon is going to be around surrendering control and moving with the flow and going with that river current and being open to where it's taking you. Pisces energy always reminds us that we can't control everything, and so just kind of releasing and surrendering as best as we can. Also remember to give yourself a lot of grace and compassion and lean into this energy of forgiveness and trust that the endings that are happening in your life are making space for more aligned new beginnings. Also try to embrace the changes that are trying to happen in your life and, you know, actually reflect on your relationship with change. Also pay attention to your dreams or any symbols that are coming up or any synchronicities. And again, honor your intuition and just try and listen to what it's trying to tell you. Because Pisces energy doesn't always speak in these like obvious, you know, terms. A lot of times it speaks through like these subtle signs and these subtle feelings and those subtle nudges. Again, lean into that energy of trust and having faith in something that is much bigger than you and believing in something, because we don't want to give our power away to our anxieties and our fears. This is also a good time to get outside and ground yourself and, you know, do some meditation as well. And it's not like it has to be like, you know, this like no mind meditation. It definitely can be if that's what you're into, but it could also be just like interpretive dancing and movement and listening to music, or it could be doing something creative like painting or writing poetry or seeing a movie. Also, don't be afraid to, again, feel all the feels and just allow those emotions to flow right through you, because again, there's a beautiful healing energy that this full moon brings, and it's like spiritual, like deep healing as well. And so I feel like with this eclipse, it's kind of like we're being asked to release and let go of things with grace. And again, just trust and have faith in something that is much bigger than you. And always keep in mind that if things are coming to a close, it just means that a new door is being opened somewhere down the line. And so with these endings come new beginnings. So yeah, I think that's all I've got to say for this full moon lunar eclipse, but be sure to like and subscribe if you liked what I had to say, or, let me know what you feel about this eclipse energy. And yeah, so thanks for watching and happy eclipse season, and until next time, love you, bye!